Death metal hails from United States of America. This time we're gonna talk about the band called Useri. Now the funny thing is there are many bands with the same name. This is probably the newest one since this is only as old as from 2015, so 10 years. But what makes it interesting is, however, this band has actually some kind of a fan base bigger than most of the other bands, even if it's the newest one with only this debut album out. So let's get into that in a bit. This is how the album looks: Abhorrent, Worship, and this is death metal. This is very much like getting back to the early 90s with a little bit of a doom death like kind of a thing, sounding rough and kind of unpolished. This is not the kind of death metal that talks to the mainstream audience, which makes me think, how come this kind of a band has already the kind of attention, the audience, which I'm talking about here, having this album out just this year, yet not exactly being the most, easy to approach kind of a death metal. And then when you click the members list, you're like, okay, this is a side project of Jex Thoth people, which kind of, helps people to find about a band which is not that known. Either way, there are a couple of demos, a compilation and EP according to Metal Archives prior to this one, so it's not like they started yesterday. But having only one album out and it's still having the kind of a few thousand people social media following is already quite something. Now, throughout the 37 minutes or so, you get to travel to the back of the basics of the death metal. You could even say this kind of reeks of late 80s. That's how rough and very basic the songwriting here is. And while there is nothing fundamentally wrong with that, let's make it clear. This is the kind of a OSDM, old school death metal, that really isn't inventing anything new. They are not even trying to reinvent here anything. They're more like, hey, we're gonna play the stuff that is, and I'm assuming here a few things, they're gonna play something that is probably done by their old heroes, meaning they want to go back and they kind of reject all this modern take. As such, it's a very kind of a nice old school death metal worship project. But then again, if you're expecting this to make waves because things are different or things are innovative or anything like that, you're in the wrong address. Now, I don't want to be too negative here, but I'm gonna say it out loud. You got two basic, very minor problems maybe, but problems nonetheless, and they are these. First of all, this doesn't really, bring anything new to the game. As such, you might feel a little bit like bummed, like, why would I decide to listen to this instead of the real early pioneers of the given style? The obvious answer is you want more of that. So when you have your freezer full of vanilla ice cream, why would you go for another dose? Maybe because it's from different manufacturer, I can't really think of anything else. The second thing is, these songs are quite lengthy for the material within. I mean, why would you go for 8 minutes for a track that is probably, all done within 3 minutes or so? I'm talking this very bare bone, very basic death metal, and that's pretty much of it. You don't get to hear these kind of Dave Vincent, Morbid Angel things going on, which would kind of be the excuse for that. Well, like I said, I don't want to be too negative about it. I'm just saying this is really that stripped and bare bone that when combined with the production, there's like the question is hanging around and nobody wants to talk about the elephant in the room. So I'm gonna just conclude here and say, if you really need your dose from the early 90s, the kind of album that you didn't even realize you might be wanting to listen without the actual need, well, this is probably the one you want to go for. But unless you are really like, how to put it, I mean, if you haven't been listening enough of that stuff, this might sound refreshing, but if you already grew up in the 90s, this is probably the album that you listen to once and figure out, okay, I don't need another dose of that, and then you move on. So depending on your fandom of old school death metal with a little bit doom death approach to it, this is either a killer or filler, and it's of course up to you to figure out which one is more fitting for you to describe. Links are provided in the description box for this music. Just don't expect anything astonishing and you're good to go. Bye.